annual meeting. So glad to have you. And for those of you who missed the trivia, don't do that next year. Be sure you're part of this because you never know what kind of a prize might be given and you could be the winner. So be sure you tune in a year from now, same time, same station, and we'll play something exciting for you.
In person. He's forgetting the in-person part.
The other moral of the story is make sure you involve someone else from your family, hopefully younger, to take over from what you've been doing.
Are you calling me old?
No, Madeline is much younger than I am. So I hope you've enjoyed the trivia evening. I've been asked to tell everybody, make sure that you mute yourself, keep yourself muted during this part of the program, unless we have a vote. And then rename yourselves if your name is not correct. If you like the name that you've got, stick with it. But if you'd like to change your name, go ahead and do that. So now that I've done my administrative details or duties, two things that we need to accomplish during this part of the meeting, which is the business meeting. Number one, we need to approve new bylaws. We've actually gone through the existing bylaws of the association and we've made some updates. And number two, we would like to talk about the new slate of officers on the board, the new officers that are incoming, and we'd like to say goodbye to one of our board members. So the first part of the meeting is the most exciting because this is what you've been waiting for a long time. Get those bylaws updated. What did we do with the bylaws? Number one, we decided to make sure that we had statements of purpose, one in our articles of organization and one in the bylaws. We consolidated those articles of purpose. If you looked at the link before the meeting to the bylaws, you would have read it. If you didn't look, I'm sure you're going to go there right after this meeting to make sure that you understand what that statement of purpose is all about. Nonetheless, be reassured that it's very important. We exist to protect the Neponset River, the lands around it, and make sure that they are accessible for all. We also talked about how we want to update our lobbying language, and we wanted to allow for meetings using remote technology. What's this last year been like? It's been one of pandemic and therefore Zoom sessions. We didn't have a provision in our bylaws to allow us to meet by Zoom. We had to meet in person. So we've done the right thing. We've got things back where they need to be. And one of the big questions for NEPRA, do we keep meeting remotely because it's a lot easier for us, or do we try to meet in person? As far as I'm concerned, I'd much rather see all of you at our annual meeting in a restaurant or someplace that's enjoyable and have a chance to talk to you face to face, but that's my preference. We've updated our descriptions on the officers' roles, and we've added the executive director as an officer of the organization, a very important thing. I think a lot of the other things that we've done is to make sure that members of the board do not have the liabilities that they may have had before. We're a little more protection for our board members and other administrative things that I think you wouldn't even know that they had needed to be changed. So anyway, what I would like to do now is put these bylaws before you and say, would you give me, could I entertain a motion to have these bylaws updated with all the changes that our governance committee under Bill Pestusek has put together over the last several months? Do I hear a motion?
So
moved.
And could I hear
Second.
Do I hear any discussion? Hearing none. Could I hear a vote to approve?
Approve.
Approve.
Yeah.
I approve.
Yay.
I see hands and I hear
Aye.
voices.
Approve.
You too, 'cause you-
Does
Aye.
anybody not vote to approve? Are there any nays? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions? Also seeing none, hearing none, the bylaws pass. So last time we had updated them was in 1996. We're doing our duty 25 years later. We're becoming a modern organization. The second thing that we want to do is talk about.
Excuse me, Rory.
Yes.
Jerry Hopcraft has his hand up, so I don't know if you have a.
I'm trying really
I
hard
don't
to
see
get it.
Jerry's image. Where is he?
He's
It's
there.
okay. I've been trying hard to get rid of it.
Okay, go.
I think I finally succeeded.
He was
Go
clapping.
ahead, Jerry. What's up?
No issue. I was voting that way, but then I couldn't get the hand to go down. So
I see. Okay, so your hand had been up and now it's down.
my technology skills are improving though.
Technology is a challenge for all of us. So the second item that we want to deal with is our board. And the board has been a very important part of how Neponset plans its future and goes forward. Some exciting news is that we've got several new members joining us this year, and I would like to welcome to the board Susan Olson Driscoll from Sharon, Jenny Goosen from Westwood, Rashana Muhammad from Hyde Park, Hung Pham from Dorchester, and Susanna Sullivan from Canton. 5 new members joining what had been an 18-member board. Now, one of our members is going to be leaving the board. This is Haley Skulberstad, who is currently residing in Providence, had been living up here in Quincy, and we're going to miss her as a board member because she had been a very important contributor, but she is still working with us on 2 of our committees, so we're very excited to have her continued involvement. So those are the new board members that are coming on. Of the existing 18 board members, 6 of them had to renew for a new 2-year term, and this includes Bill Pastusek from Coleraine, David Biggers from Canton, Artis Johnston from Stoughton, Brendan Mclaughlin from Milton, Richard O'Mara from Dorchester, and Bill Wiseman from Walpole. So 6 people who had been serving on the board, and they are renewing their terms to serve for 2 more years, which is really appreciated. The board members who are continuing, and they're in the middle of a 2-year term, Jerry Hopcroft from Norwood, Paul Allenstein from Sharon, Martha McDonough from Hyde Park, Tabor Keeley from Milton, Maria Lyons from Dorchester, myself, Kyle McBurney from Milton, Steve Brayton from Dedham, Heather Audette from Norwood, Mike Gillette from Foxborough, and Jim Green from Canton. Now, of all those great board members whose names I just mentioned, several of them have decided to become the new officer team, and I want to identify them. I'm turning over the presidency to Kyle McBurney from Milton. Our new vice president will be Jim Green from Canton, and our new secretary, Heather Audette from Norwood. Continuing as our treasurer will be Jerry Hopcroft. So to approve all of these changes, I need to have a vote from all of our members to pass this slate of board members and officers for the coming 2 years. Or I'm going to say that the people who are being appointed are serving 2-year terms. So could I hear a motion to move this slate of board members and officers?
So moved.
And could I hear a second?
Second.
So good. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
I hear unanimous approval. I'm not even going to listen for nays or abstentions because I know they don't exist. So in turning this over to Kyle, which I'm going to do right now, I want to tell you it's been a delight for me to serve as president for the last 4 years. It's a rewarding experience. I have learned so much, and all I can say is that you should aspire to become a board member and then maybe become president and learn all the things that go on within our watershed. I had no idea. I am an enlightened man for sure. Thank you very much. Kyle, it's yours.
All right, so no take backs, everybody. But first of all, I just wanted to collectively thank Rory for his time. I think if there's any perfect example of his energy and passion and dedication to NEPRA, I mean, it's you just saw it, right? You could feel it, you could hear it. And Rory, if you think you're getting off easy just because you're not president anymore, I think you'll be a little disappointed. But hello, everybody. It's great to meet you, albeit virtually. But yes, the second year of a virtual annual meeting, and I think we're really comfortable in this environment. So it's great to see all your faces, and I really enjoyed getting to know some of you in the questionnaire. So my name is Kyle McBurney. This is upcoming my 4th year on the board. I live here in Milton, just past the trolley line, and I, just past the Greenway River Trail, which is probably my favorite part of the entire community. How I got started with NEPRA is probably a similar story to everybody else. I started with cleanups that kind of grew to other events, meeting more people. And I was just so impressed by everybody I was meeting, board members, staff, volunteers. I always thought if an alien landed on Earth, came to me and said, Kyle, show me the best people around, I would point them to the Neponset River Watershed Association and their respective members, just excellent people through and through. And I think this is a really exciting time. I mean, Rory, to your credit, I think you leave as president with a organization that's as financially strong as ever, more diverse, growing. And it's just a really interesting time in our political world where I think we're truly galvanized on the climate fight on a local level, on a national level, and on an international level. So it's a really exciting time, a lot of work to be done ahead. And I guess on that note, I'm going to pass this to Ian Cook, the executive director, who we're so fortunate to have, who will go through a little bit more about the inner workings of the association and what's next. So I look forward to meeting all of you soon in person, especially you new board members. And if you ever wanted to connect, I'm always here.
Excellent. Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Rory. We're very lucky to have an incredible set of volunteers and board members to help us guide and build the organization. And I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk a little bit about what has certainly been an extraordinary year for everyone, an extraordinary year, and no exception with the Watershed Association. And I have a couple of slides to illustrate this. Let me just get these up here. All right. So here is a picture of the NEPRA staff back in February of 2020. And you'll notice the absence of masks and the smiles and the total ignorance of what was about to happen. It really is. I mean, when you think back on it's sort of mind-boggling to think back over the events of the last year. And you know, I'm trying to make light of it, but it's certainly not a situation that one wants to easily make light of. For NEPRA, the pandemic meant, you know, the staff who got to see each other every day, you know, not seeing each other. It meant hiring new people that we hadn't even met. We actually have 2 employees that have been working together for more than a year now who haven't met one another. It meant mastering all sorts of remote skills. It also brought many of our activities to a screeching halt. So things like Riverfest, the annual meeting, the activities we all love that really bring people together and build a sense of camaraderie all came to a screeching halt, as did a lot of our education work. You know, anyone who's been involved in schools or has kids or grandkids knows what an incredibly challenging year it has been for schools and for education. So in spite of that, we did over time manage to adapt. And the last year, surprisingly, has been quite a productive one for NEPRA. One of the first things we did is we reworked our water testing program, which involves 60 volunteers. We literally took, this is Jim, who does the pH testing for us at the office. And Jim literally now has to sit outside to do that work. But amazingly, we came up with a new approach, and that program never missed a beat. And our volunteers collected all the data you would expect them to collect in a normal year. Another example, training went outside. These are the students from the Excel program who are getting occupational training to get ready for jobs in the water and wastewater industry. And we work with them to train them on water testing techniques and other things. We were able to keep this program going as well. Another big push for us in the last year has been around trout. And how do we try to protect and restore and improve habitat for these iconic fish? And one of the reasons we worry about trout, this is a map of all the known trout in Massachusetts. And if you look on the left, you see lots of big dots indicating streams with lots of trout. And if you look on the right, in eastern Massachusetts, there's almost nothing left. And that little red dot with the arrow pointing at it is Trap Hole Brook, which is a brook that's very near and dear to our heart. and which is arguably the best remaining trout stream in eastern Massachusetts. And we're very much determined to protect it. And we've been very lucky to have some very energetic and thoughtful partners in the Greater Boston chapter of Trout Unlimited, who love any excuse to get on their waders and get outside and do science and do restoration and do advocacy. So we started, in addition to our regular water quality monitoring program, we started a new study of trout populations in the watershed using environmental DNA to detect what species are present in the stream from water quality samples rather than traditional methods of trying to catch the fish, which obviously present a number of challenges. We added a wonderful new environmental fellow. This is Declan, who got a lot of time to spend quality time outside, tromping around in streams, collecting data. And all of this information about trout is feeding into a new interactive map that we've created to try to help ourselves and the public and anybody who's interested understand the status and the threats of the trout populations around the watershed. This is work that we're continuing to do. This is a 2-year study that we're finishing up this year, and that we hope will provide not only guidance for protecting and improving Trap Hole Brook, but the other streams in the watershed shown here that also support trout population, and ultimately trying to connect them back together. This is the Mill Pond Dam on Trap Hole Brook. It is the only dam on Trap Hole Brook. It prevents trout from being able to move up and downstream and find, appropriate spawning areas, feeding areas, refuge areas when things get hot or trouty. It also, because one of the things that ponds do is they make the water hotter, and trout need very cold water. So we've spent the last year spending a lot of time working on this dam with our partners from the Division of Ecological Restoration, the town of Norwood, and others. And we now, by the end of next month, we should have all the permits necessary to remove the dam. By the end of this week, we should have grant applications in to help fund the $800,000 cost of getting this removed. And we think this is one of the key steps that's going to help our Trap Hole Brook trout survive and thrive and adapt to climate change. It's also very much a human adaptation and flood control project as well. As you can see, this dam is covered with trees. It's not in very good condition. It's likely to fail in a future storm. And if that happens, it will send even more water rushing down to flood communities downstream. So it's both a habitat project and a climate adaptation project on several levels. Again, we partnered with Trout Unlimited. This is on Pine Tree Brook, where we have now finished removing 2 stream barriers, controlling an invasive Phragmites infestation, and with the help of our friends from TU, done some replanting of the floodplain there. This is our next project. After many years, we've finally persuaded the Department of Conservation and Recreation to work with us to remove this dam. Engineers from DCR right now are working on finalizing the plans for that, and we hope maybe by the end of the year this will be gone. This is the so-called Canton Ave Dam on Pine Tree Brook. And after this is removed, there will only be 1 remaining dam on the brook. Another thing that happened this year is I think a lot of us realized just how important local open spaces were when those were essentially when almost everything else we were used to spending our time doing was taken away. And all across the state, and certainly here in the Neponset watershed is no exception. The number of people getting outdoors, using trails, exploring recreational resources really exploded. This, of course, is the Harvest River Bridge on the Neponset Greenway. And a lot of our focus on the last year has been building up our efforts around greenway management. We spent a lot of time working with the Neponset River Greenway Council, helping them develop a strategic plan for both maintaining the greenway which is a big task, and also finishing it. You know, the original vision for the Neponset Greenway was an extraordinary document, and we've come so far that you can almost forget that there's a lot in there that hasn't been done. You know, our greenway dead ends at the downstream end, and we need to connect it to the Boston Harbor Walk. At the upstream end, it also dead ends. We need to connect it to the Warner Trail. And then there are many neighborhoods along the route that really still have not realized the benefits of access to the river. The Greenway Council did manage to do some programming this year, although it ended up being virtual. Their signature event for many years has been the pumpkin float, and they figured out a way to make it a virtual event this year, although everybody likes it better in person. And then this is the infamous wall along the Neponset. This is just upstream of Mattapan Square in the Edgewater Drive neighborhood, and it really exemplifies some of the neighborhoods that still do not have access to the river. And basically, if the river is on the other side of this wall, and it's an impediment that basically for generations has separated the river from the neighborhood. On the other side of the wall is a beautiful resource that people should have access to. There's space for a trail, the river itself on the left. We've been very lucky to be working with a group of extraordinary advocates from the Edgewater Drive Neighborhood Association, Vivian on the right and Lorraine on the left. This is the only opening in this wall for a half mile through Mattapan and Hyde Park. And it just seems crazy to us to have public parkland that is literally walled off from a neighborhood that's lacking in open space. And one of the great things that happened this year is a whole variety of partners came together to rally around this issue. They've started developing ideas for what you could do differently. This is, for better or worse, this is a historic wall that was built in the 1930s. So one of the concepts is to create openings in the wall to invite the community in so that it's not a complete barrier that isolates the area back there. And one of the great developments this year is finally all that advocacy has paid off, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation has agreed to start a planning process to come up with an agreed upon plan of how to make upgrades and open up this part of the river to the community, as well as another area we've been working on just upstream called Doyle Playground. So very exciting and something to look forward to over the next year. We also, in the pandemic, had to adapt our outreach. A lot of what we do is outreach and just raising awareness of the river. We came up with all kinds of our Watershed Wednesdays, all kinds of virtual programs to get people involved. There were a very few examples where we were able to get people outside, actually out on the river to explore it. Fortunately, canoes are usually long enough. You can put two people in a canoe and have them be 6 feet apart. Our school program, which is something that we have been really focusing on growing to help with the goal of trying to reach every fifth grader in the Neponset watershed. Before the pandemic struck, this program was really poised to take off. This is what it used to look like. This is Nancy, our outreach director, doing some hands-on demonstrations with kids. This is a groundwater model she's showing them. Unfortunately, this year, this program started to look like this. You know, it's for many months, nothing happened with it. And to Nancy's credit, she was able to adapt the program to an online version. And over in the winter and this spring, she has managed to reconnect with all of her teachers and students. We have continued growing the program even through the pandemic. And this year, by the end of the school year, we will probably have reached almost 3,000 students, which is about a 500 student increase from last year. And it's getting us pretty close, not quite there, but pretty close to our goal of reaching every fifth grader. You know, and we think that's basic literacy. Where does your water come from? Where does it go to? What does that drain out in your street do? This was also strangely an incredible year for volunteers. You know, most of our volunteer activities in the first part of the year had to be canceled. But as we got a better handle on how to work through the pandemic, we had incredible enthusiasm in our fall cleanup, which was the biggest cleanup we had ever held at that point. And then in our spring cleanup was again the biggest cleanup we had ever had. We actually had 400 people in the spring, which beat our previous record from the fall of 350 people, all spread out in neighborhoods all up and down the river. A wonderful activity, a way to beautify and take care of our river and our parks, but also an opportunity to bring families together to learn about the river and as these two are demonstrating, have some real fun. Other ways we got volunteers involved, we're starting the process now of trying to find ways to use volunteers to address the challenge of invasive species around the watershed. This is a pond in Canton that is completely overgrown with water chestnut plant, invasive exotic plant. And these volunteers, these are very valiant volunteers who are trying to pull all of these plants out before the seeds fall off for the season. And I think you'll be seeing more of this kind of activity in the future. Strangely, and this is a funny picture. It seems like I decided to take a nap in the middle of this meeting, but there were also some other unexpected results of the pandemic. One was, it turns out if you can invite volunteers to a Zoom meeting with their state representative, that's a lot easier than asking them to schlep into Boston for an hour and deal with parking or finding train tickets to come to the State House for Lobby for River Days. So we had an incredibly effective Lobby for River Days, and we met with more of our representatives with more volunteers engaged than ever before. The work of education around water quality and stormwater, which is the biggest threat to water quality, continues without delay. We reached, through outreach and partnership with our municipalities, we reached about 200,000 homes with printed materials, online campaigns, presentations, basically getting the word out that what you do in your yard, in your business, the things that go into those storm drains directly affect the health of the river. We started getting volunteers out labeling those storm drains with little markers, just telling people, hey, don't put something down here because this goes right to the river. And then through our advocacy, we did a lot of work, which is frankly not terribly photogenic compared to some of the science work and some of the volunteer things, but is equally important. We developed a model stormwater bylaw for municipalities that's become a statewide model, and Carrie, our advocacy director, has been working with virtually all of our towns to get them to update their stormwater bylaws so that when development and redevelopment projects occur, things get better rather than worse. And we have almost all of the towns making steps in the right direction at this point. Another challenge, how do you pay for these things? Municipalities face real challenges in paying for stormwater management. We've done a lot of outreach with municipalities about different approaches they can take to help meet those costs and make those investments. Patrick has been continuing to pursue upgrading our infrastructure. Fundamentally, stormwater is an infrastructure system. It's one that's been pretty poorly designed from the outset and very poorly maintained over the years and really needs to be upgraded. At this point, NEPRA has now completed about $2 million worth of stormwater retrofit projects where we take runoff from a neighborhood that was going straight into the river and bring it into a situation like this. This is called a bioretention cell. So instead of going right into the river, the water comes in here, soaks into plants, into the ground, helps recharge and get us ready for the next drought by recharging our groundwater, helps slow the water down, which helps with increasing intensity of rainfall that we're experiencing and helps clean it up. And so at this point, Patrick has, we have completed $2 million worth of construction projects that are actually built and functioning. And Patrick now has $4 million worth of projects that have designs that we are working on trying to figure out how to get the funding to build. So hopefully more progress on that coming over this year. And then also developing technical tools like this interactive map that uses data from every parcel in the Neponset watershed, thousands and thousands of land parcels, to identify parcels that are potentially good candidates for stormwater retrofit and that have higher than usual pollution generation. And then the last thing I just want to hit in the last few moments here is, this year, the rain event in Norwood really reminded all of us, if we hadn't been thinking about it already, how profoundly important climate change is going to be. This was basically a 1-hour rainstorm that destroyed a regional hospital because the drainage system ended up running off into the basement of the hospital. 800 people lost their jobs, and the hospital is still closed now. It was an unusual, it was an exceptional event, but also a reminder of things we need to be thinking about getting ready for. It was also a reminder that a lot of the watershed association's work is not new. When we talk about focusing on climate, it's not that we have to do something completely new in many cases, but a lot of times it's a matter of making sure we're focusing on multiple goals. So when you're doing stormwater management work, make sure you're focusing on the water quality and the flooding implications of that. When you're doing dam restoration work or habitat restoration work, yes, you're trying to save the trout, but you're also trying to focus on things that are going to reduce flooding in the future. One of the accomplishments we made in this area this year was we finally got the last few of our towns to complete the so-called state resilience planning process. It's a voluntary process the communities go through to do some basic planning around climate adaptation, and something we've been pushing our communities to do. We're also, hopefully this year, with the help of many generous donors last fall, going to be adding an additional staff person to give us more capacity to work with municipalities on climate change issues, particularly to get them working together on a regional basis. This is a map of future flooding probabilities in the Neponset estuary. You can see Boston, Milton, and Quincy on this map. And it really brings home the notion that, in New England, we don't like to have municipalities work together, or municipalities don't tend to work together, but the solutions here are all shared solutions. And we're working right now to try to put together a project involving all three of these communities that would look at the role of the Neponset's extraordinary salt marshes in helping to prevent flooding, and how we can both reduce flooding and protect our salt marshes, which is a major goal of our strategic plan. So more on that coming this year. And then last but not least, I just want to introduce one other person. This is Jennifer Rogers, who is our new river restoration director. She is on maternity leave at the moment, but she is filling the shoes of Chris Hirsch, who moved on to a new position with Division of Ecological Restoration this year. And I think you'll hear a lot more from her. And you'll see her, this is not actually in the Neponset Marsh, but you'll see a lot of her out in the Neponset Marshes and other places over the coming year. So last but not least, I just want to thank all the folks that make this possible, our members, our incredible volunteers, our board, our wonderful staff. All of you have worked with passion and resourcefulness and adaptationness, if that's a word, which I'm pretty sure it's not, over the last year to enable us to continue moving forward in an incredibly challenging time. I hope that this is a picture of what the annual meeting used to look like. I hope next year we will actually be together in person in a setting like this. So thank you very much for everything you do. And then the last thing I want to mention is I do want to take a second and just say a few brief words about Roy Mcgregor. As you saw tonight, one of the great things about Roy is that he's a package deal. He comes with a whole family, all of whom are wonderful advocates. And if you look, Roy has been our board president for 4 years now. And if you look at the trajectory of the organization, the last 4 years have been ones of tremendous growth, tremendous accomplishment, much greater participation from our communities, much greater engagement with our municipalities. And a lot of that can be laid at Rory's doorstep. He's incredibly energetic. He is relentlessly positive. He has unending faith in the ability of people to step up to the task. He has incredible faith in young people to step in and lead. And I certainly have learned a lot from him over the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to continuing that because we're not actually letting him leave the board. He's just not going to be president anymore. So thank you very much. All right. And with that, so that's my my little update. Let me stop this here. So that's my recap of the last year. And the one last thing that I have to do is every year we like to take a second and recognize somebody that has made a significant difference for the Neponset River. And this year, the person we are going to recognize is Paul Halkiotis, who is the new Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town of Norwood. And Paul, every year we have this long debate about who should we recognize, who should we recognize, and Paul has been a really special character within the Neponset watershed. He's not actually been with the town of Norwood for terribly long, but in a very short time, he's made a tremendous difference in terms of helping Norwood to be really proactive, particularly proactive about climate. Paul made Norwood the first town in the Neponset watershed to complete the state's new climate vulnerability planning process. I think Paul finished about a year before any other town in the watershed started, ran a wonderful process that has really laid out a strong plan for the town to start following. He also was instrumental in protection of a piece of land, sort of neglected little corner of the watershed along the Neponset River called the quote unquote Saints Lot, which is at a dead end of a series of streets right by Hawes Brook in South Norwood, which is an environmental justice target neighborhood in Norwood. And, he was able to help the town see the value of preserving a piece of land to create a riverfront and a waterfront in a place that a lot of people would have written off just as an old vacant lot that could be better used for parking cars. And he's in the process now of trying to develop a plan to really revitalize that area and make it a destination for the neighborhood. And Paul has also been instrumental in our work around Trap Hole Brook with the Mill Pond Dam. So, and I guess the last thing I would say is, often the folks we recognize are municipal staff. Because one of the things I've learned in my time in the watershed is that more than any other level of government, it's municipalities that determine whether the Neponset River is going to be clean and healthy and beautiful and accessible or not. And sometimes it only takes one or two people to really change the direction that a community can head in. So, Paul, thank you very much. We're going to follow up with normally I would hand you a nice little award, but I can't do that in this format. So we will drop off at your office sometime this week, a token of our appreciation, but just wanted to thank you for all you've done and say, just like Rory, we're still expecting very good things from you in the years ahead. So, and if you have a few words you want to add, Paul, go right ahead.
Thank you, Ann. I'm not going to let you down. We're going to do big things in the future. I want to thank you and the board of directors for this award. It's really gratifying. in local government, we don't get a lot of recognition. But I really appreciate it. Over the last 36 years, I've partnered with 2 other watershed associations. In when I was doing my graduate school work in 1985, I received a grant from the Connecticut River Watershed Association for funding some of my graduate research. In 1985, in 2015, I worked with the North and South River Watershed Association, and we built the South River Park in Marshfield, and we did a number of other initiatives with them. And I'm so pleased that now in 2021 that I've been able to partner with the North and South River Watershed Association on updating our stormwater bylaw, the flood zone bylaw, the mill pond dam removal, and working together on the new park that we're going to build at the end of the St. Street. I want to thank you all. You do tremendous work that's so important: education, volunteerism, and restoration of the Neponset River. Keep up the good work. Thank you for this award. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so with that, I think we are on to the main event here. So it's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker. I'm just trying to make sure I'm not forgetting something else I was supposed to do in the agenda, but to introduce our main speaker, Lawrence O'Donnell. And Lawrence is somebody who can only be described as having had a fascinating career. Lawrence is a son of Dorchester in the best possible way. He is the host of The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC. Many people may not realize, I certainly didn't, that he was also a writer and producer for the West Wing TV series years ago, one of my favorites at the time, and something even my daughter has enjoyed in recent years. And he also had a very significant political career of his own of his own right, working in Congress in various capacities with many different committees that gives him some of the insight that informs him today. And we're very grateful that he was willing to come and share some of his thoughts about his time on the Neponset with us tonight. So thank you, Lawrence. Without further ado.
Thank you very much. It's fun to be here, and it's fun to be with a group where I do not have to explain the word Neponset, which I always use when people ask me where I'm from, because I'll say Boston, and then I start to describe that there's that famous river you've heard of. That's the northern border of Boston, and I came from the southern border, which had this river named the Neponset River, named after, instead of a king, as the northern river is, named after the local tribe that was there before kings claimed any right to that land. And so it's a very, very important place to me. I grew up on the Neponset River, and I think if we were to ask for a show of hands right now of how many of us grew up swimming in the Neponset River, unless there's someone from my neighborhood, I would be probably the only one with a hand to raise. And we didn't come close to understanding the risks we were taking. It was like a water park to us before that phrase had been invented. And it was better than any beach. It was just the greatest possible place where you could, spend the day with the guys at St. Brendan's Elementary School and St. Gregory's and some of the other schools from around there, the Kenny School. And there were highs and lows about it, to put it mildly. And I want to read you the one notice, the single notice that exists that I'm aware of in the news media of the life that we lived underneath the Royce E. Smith Bridge in Dorchester and the Granite Avenue Bridge sometimes. And it was a report in the Boston Globe on Sunday, September 22nd, reporting what happened the day before, Saturday. And this report was worthy of 7 sentences in the Sunday Globe that day. And the headline is, Dorchester boy drowns in the Neponset River. And I'm going to read you these 7 sentences. Robert J. LaCoy, 16 of 110 Templeton Street, Dorchester, drowned in the Neponset River in Dorchester near the Granite Avenue Bridge at 5 p.m. Saturday. His body was recovered by members of the MDC police scuba team at 7:50 p.m., some 100 yards upstream from the bridge. According to the MDC police, LaCoy was a senior at Boston College High School. His parents are deceased, and he lived with his grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. George J. Madden, and a sister. He had gone swimming in the river with a friend, William Driscoll, 20, of 17 Cedar Grove, Dorchester. They were on a 50-gallon metal drum in the river when LaCoy fell into the water. Driscoll tried to assist him, then notified the MDC police. The MDC sent a team of 6 scuba divers under Sergeant Richard Feeney and 2 MDC boats for dragging operations. And that was the risk that we were taking every day and never thinking about. And we stood there when the word spread. I wasn't there when that event happened, but I was close enough by that the word spread. And you know, this is the part of memory that I wish could be more accurate, because the word spread before the existence of cell phones. Billy Driscoll somehow got word to the police before the existence of cell phones, probably by running up to the bridge tender, if someone was in the bridge tending booth there at the time, and somehow getting the word. But this communication spread across the ground there from Granite Avenue up to Adams Corner, and we all just started to gather. And because Bobby went to a high school that I didn't attend, he knew people that I didn't know. And we were discovering that as we stood there for those hours, waiting and waiting and waiting and watching this search, that he had a life bigger than we realized. And it was so poignant to be discovering that on what was the last day of his life. He was also, by an order of magnitude, the best looking 16-year-old boy in Dorchester. And so the girls' reaction to this was a chorus of tragic emotion that right there on the scene, not, you know, you didn't have to wait for the wake or the funeral, but it was right there on the scene and for hours into the darkness where, you know, the body didn't come up, as the report accurately says, until about 10 minutes before 8. And Billy Driscoll was one of my heroes at the time. I was Bobby's age, I was 16. You know, if Billy Driscoll couldn't save you in a situation like that, then no one could. And it was one of those moments that I didn't think of as a turning point, and probably would not have been a turning point were it not for our age, because we were just then, I mean, Billy was 20 years old and still swimming down the river, but we were just then beginning to age out of this. We were beginning to discover that, oh, well, you know, girls are at the beach, they're not down the river. And so it was just at the dawning of our expanding of our summer horizons. And the wonder of it is, when I look back at that, is that Bobby was the only one. Bobby was the only one. My friends, my teenage friends died in different ways, and motorcycle accidents and crazy situations, often involving drunkenness, but we only lost one. in the Neponset River. And that's kind of amazing if you knew what we were doing. And so, we were down there. The authorization for the building of the Royce E. Smith Bridge was the summer of 1953. And my brother Michael, who's my oldest brother, was possibly the first person who wasn't working on the Royce E. Smith Bridge to walk across it. And the way he did that is when they finally got the girders going all the way across the bridge, the first girder that went all the way across the river. He simply got up on that girder at, I don't know, as a teenager, I guess, and just walked across it. And that became something we all ended up doing. And underneath the pavement of that bridge, as you go over it at 60 miles an hour, underneath it, there is this kind of crate-like structure that is this set of girders that's holding it up. We used to be walking underneath your car as you were driving over that bridge at 60 miles an hour to go to Cape Cod or something. We were holding the girders above our heads, walking on the, 4-inch wide girders underneath us, 1 foot in front of the other. No one ever fell from that. No one ever fell out of there. Could have easily. The great rite of passage into manhood in that neighborhood was jumping off the Royce E. Smith Bridge into the Neponset River, which I summoned the courage to do exactly once. And other people, my brother Billy and so many others, used to just do it all the time, routinely. The real brave guys would dive headfirst off of that bridge. And we knew that we did not know what was underneath that water. And every once in a while, at least 1 out of 10 times jumping the bridge, your foot would go into the mud at the bottom of the river. And your foot not coming out of that mud was a 50-50 proposition, but that didn't stop anyone. Every once in a while, someone would report, I think my foot touched a shopping cart, or I think my foot touched the fender of a car, or, all these different things. And we just, kept jumping and not thinking in any way about what could go wrong. And so it was this, it was a play place for teenagers, which is a kind of different kind of play than, the elementary school kids, although most of us began going there in elementary school because so many of us had older brothers. And, parents knew about this, they didn't care. You'd walk out your door, in our case, we'd walk out the door on Hilltop Street or Grayson Street. And, most parents didn't bother to ask where you were going. And this wasn't a matter of neglect. It was just the industry standard at the time. They weren't, keeping diaries of exactly what we were doing. And, we might say, well, we're going down the river. And going down the river meant we were going to go down there and, sit on those rocks and swim in the river from there and climb up under the bridge. We had a giant rope hanging from the girders under the Royce E. Smith Bridge that we used to swing out, Tarzan-like, and drop off into the water. And, it was just a fantastic place. We never, ever had the slightest demand for municipal swimming pools. We heard that those things were coming along and, oh, there's one somewhere over there and there's someone, but it would never have crossed our minds to go to such a place because everything we wanted was there on the Neponset River, which was the very first place where I ever set foot on a boat, was on the Neponset River. There used to be a small marina and boatyard right beside the Granite Ave Bridge. And my father went down there with my brother Michael when Michael was 15. So it was, close to close to circa 1960. And he bought a sailboat for him, a wooden sailboat for $1,200, which Michael still has. And that was the first boat that any of us had ever set foot on. And we used to use the Royce Smith Bridge to remove the mast of the boat. And we weren't the only ones who did that for sailboats. For winter storage, you'd pull the mast out. Someone would get up on the top of the bridge with a rope and pull the mast out and all that stuff. And so there was this really vibrant life on the river for very, very, very few people. There were some boats, you know, that were kept up near Lower Mills. There were some boats kept, you know, near the Granite Avenue Bridge and further down, closer to the harbor. So there were the people who had some boats there, but as far as I know, we were the only kind of, you know, recreational beachgoers, so to speak, at this place that didn't have any beaches. And if the word pollution was invented, then we didn't know it. And we would sit there, you know, on the rocks that are kind of at the base of the Royce C. Smith Bridge, and turn to our right and note the spectacular set of colors in those liquids that are pouring out of the Keystone camera factory, which was right there and operating and making cameras and making film. And you can imagine the chemical processes in that. It was an open pipe. It wasn't even a closed pipe. It was just this kind of open pipe, and you see this stuff just gush out. And that was, you know, about, I don't know, a football field's distance away from where we were swimming. It didn't seem to discolor the water of the Neponset River, which could not be discolored because it was so dark and, you know, muddy anyway. And we never occurred to us that, you know, that stuff coming out of that pipe could be harmful to us. Never crossed our minds. Certainly never crossed the minds of any parent, you know, who knew, you know, that their sons were down there, you know, swimming in the river. And so it was this incredibly colorful, in so many ways, place to be and to live and to be connected to. And so there was to know that there's an active and real life at the river now, which I know because of, you know, what's changed and how you can actually walk in the areas that used to be a dump there, you know, on the other side of the Royce C. Smith Bridge. That's all just wonderful and remarkable to me, that people have that life, because we were once the only people who had any kind of life on that river, the only people. And it was a dangerous life, and it was a juvenile delinquent life in many ways. And it was just a fantastic opportunity and a fantastic way to be, and to have our own adventures. I mean, our own adventures within that zip code, you know, that 02124 zip code, to not have to set a foot out of it, to have these fantastic adventures all summer long, all day long in the summer. And I just can't, I can't imagine how dry, which I think is the appropriate word, our childhoods and adolescence would have been without it. But, you know, 2 years after Bobby LaCoy drowned, I was going off to college, where I knew no one there had ever swum in the Neponset River. And that it turns out was the turning point. You know, for those of us who did go to college, which was probably about 50% of us in that age group there, in that neighborhood, that was the point where without ever knowing it, I never knew the day. I never knew the day when I could have said, this is my last time swimming in the Neponset River. I don't know when that day was. I just know that it didn't happen after I went to college. And I think that was the normal way we kind of evolved out of that pastime. And it's a, it's one of those ways of life that I now get to sit here and feel like, the really old guy, talking about the yesteryear world, that could not exist. And it couldn't exist for so many other reasons now, beyond just the new environmental awareness and how, we do understand what, polluted water is and why you shouldn't swim in it and all of that. But just the, the parental laissez-faire that allowed that kind of life. And that's not the way I parented, and it's not the way, I don't think it's the way any of the guys I know who were swimming down the river parented themselves. They weren't letting that kind of stuff happen with their own kids when their turn came. But it's that connection, that using what you have and appreciating what you have and recognizing the value of what you have. That's what was going on, in this kind of primitive and crude and juvenile way, by these, elementary school and high school boys who found their way to the river at the point where that kind of life on American rivers in urban environments had disappeared. There, as far as I know, and I've talked a lot about this actually with people who grew up in the same period in New York City, no one was swimming in the East River. No one in Brooklyn or Queens was saying, let's go swim in the East River. Certainly no one would dare at that time in the 1960s think of setting foot in the water of the Gowanus Canal, which, by the way, was probably about the same pollution level as the Neponset River. Since we now know the phrase for what we were watching was industrial waste, and watching it just pour out of the Keystone Camera Factory. And so we were, we might have been, among the last, in urban America, to have that kind of relationship with that kind of body of water in that kind of place. And I just, I just think of all of us as just being lucky, really, really lucky to have had it. And, it was a completely unpredictable life turn that I would end up through bouncing around in a bunch of different ways. As the staff director, which is to say the chief of staff of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works. And that brought the Neponset River and Boston Harbor into focus for the chairman, who was Daniel Patrick Moynihan of New York, who I was working for. Brought that into focus in a very serious way, because all of that effort, to clean up Boston Harbor was similarly being applied from California to New York to, Texas to, because when you're legislating those things at the federal level, what you're trying to do is get as many partners of interest in other states as you possibly could. And so, Pat Moynihan had Ted Kennedy, who needed Boston Harbor, and, Moynihan appreciated what that meant for, cleanup of Boston Harbor. And I certainly did. And I was massively biased toward anything. And Ted Kennedy knew it. And he always exploited my massive bias toward anything that benefited interest in Massachusetts. He always knew he could use that, and Boston in particular. And so to have ended up on the repair end at the federal level, the kind of the grandest level, not necessarily the most attentive level or the most effective level, but to end up on the repair end of what was coming out of that pipe at the Keystone factory. Decades after I was watching that stuff come out of the pipe at the Keystone factory was just one of the lucky turns of life in a career that had no career planning and still doesn't. You know, I could ramble on and on about all such things, but I know we want to open this discussion to questions, which I'm happy to do because I have this funny approach to audiences, which are rare for me, interactive audiences. You know, because the thing I do on TV, I do alone in a room, so I have no idea what the audience is thinking or whether they're actually interested in this. When pre-pandemic, if I found myself in an auditorium with an audience, this was the most magical possible experience for me because I could just ask the audience what they want to talk about. And we have that opportunity here. And so rather than me droning on, I'd love to know what's on your mind and what I might be able to answer, either about life and death in the Neponset River or anything else, including is Martin Sheen really a good guy? And the answer is yes. So we can skip that question.
Excellent. All right. So we, thank you. We have, the Zoom format is not quite as good for that audience interaction as a true auditorium. So we have stacked the deck by recruiting a small group of Dorchester natives who are going to field some of the questions that folks sent in. So here they're starting to appear. So, and I'm going to let them.
You know what Dorchester natives means in this discussion? It means fact checkers. They can correct anything I got wrong.
That's right. They're gonna really check your cred here. And I actually I have to confess, I consider myself as having grown up in Dorchester, but I can't really claim that because I arrived at the age of 7. So.
Oh yeah, no, you don't. No, you would new be claimed. No. You'd be the new kid to this day.
Absolutely. All right. So Maria, do you want to start us off? Maybe introduce yourself. And I think you had a question to get us started.
So hi Larry, I'm Maria, and I was born in Dorchester and still live in Dorchester. I grew up at St. Peter's, and now I live at Port Norfolk. And I must have been one of the girls on the beach, not jumping in the river. So a lot of time spent at Malibu Beach and Tinney and Beach. And you know, it's interesting what you said about the water and the pollution, because in the 60s, we went in the water and we knew it was kind of dirty, but we went in the water anyway. But then it got so bad that nobody went in the water anymore. And there's like a lag between when people went to the beaches and when it finally got cleaned up. And now most of the beaches, thank heavens, are nice and clean. Tinney still needs some work because there's a pipe going out here, but we're working on it. But anyway, it's just interesting. It's just so wonderful that most of the places the water has been cleaned up. But like you said, we didn't really know for a while when we were little what pollution was. And then we learned, and everybody stayed away for a while. But now we're back. So anyway, I'm going to reminisce a little with you too. Hopefully you didn't just swim in the river. Hopefully you once in a while did go down to check out the girls at Tinney and maybe there you were a little bravado down there as well. So answer carefully. If you remember this, you can tell everybody about it. If you don't remember it, we'll have to go find you and perhaps fix that situation. Did you ever jump into the water from the pier at Tinney and Beach? And if so, did you jump off of high seconds?
Oh, that's such a good question. I believe I did, but you know, I went to Tinney and Beach very, very rarely. You know, we just didn't like beaches. I mean, it's just, we were such urban people, you know, and Tinney and Beach was as crappy a beach as I've ever seen. And so it just didn't, you know, by that time I had seen the beach at Green Harbor, you know, and where my cousins were one time. And that was beach to us. It's real beach, you know, big stretches of sand and all that. So I probably did that jump, but I would not, my memory would not be precise enough to know whether I did the brave jump or the cowardly choice in that situation. I don't know. And you know, it reminds me of another factor, I think, that helped us drift away from swimming in the river. And that was, you know, the time we're talking about, that, you know, the Southeast Expressway is literally built in the time that we're talking about, right? These little kids are swimming down there in that river while the Royce E. Smith Bridge is being built. Well, then it gets built. And then getting south to other beach opportunities becomes a much faster thing. You don't have to go down Route 3A. You can actually do it on a highway all the way, you know, eventually all the way to the Cape Cod Canal. But you couldn't do that when I was a kid. You couldn't drive highway nonstop to the Cape Cod Canal. And so that infrastructure thing, you know, on the roads was happening at the very same time that we were kind of graduating out of it. And I do think that infrastructure component opened up more summer alternatives to us.
Yeah, even just to drive down to Nantasket was a treat.
Yeah, the drive to Nantasket took forever, and that's the other beach. That was the place where when our parents were going to take us to the beach, it was Nantasket, and that was an amazing beach, just amazing.
But you had to walk to Malibu or Tinney and during the week because Dad took the car.
Yeah, we could walk to Tinney and I mean, and absolutely. I mean, we were there.
Those days. All right, thank you, Ed.
I did play basketball on those basketball courts that were installed eventually, you know, right at Tinney and Beach there. I remember when they went in, that was very exciting.
Take a drive by because they have fixed it up. They have a brand new playground. It looks nice. It's just that the water quality still has to be cleaned up.
You know what? Next time I'm going to get off the expressway and get in there and take a close look.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. So our next candidate here is Brendan Mclaughlin. Brendan, do you want to introduce yourself? You need to unmute, Brendan.
Sorry. Yeah. Hey, Lawrence, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm here with my wife, Mary. I live in Milton now, but I grew up in St. Anne's in Dorchester, not far from where you grew up. And I just wanted to ask you how growing up in Dorchester has influenced your career in both journalism and politics.
You know, I never really thought about that. I'll tell you the thing that I think has influenced it, which is related, but not geographically exclusive. I think growing up in the Roman Catholic Church is helpful for politics because my first political lesson was taught to me by my first grade nun, Sister Genesius, at St. Brendan's School. And what she said to us was, you should pray to the Blessed Virgin because Jesus cannot refuse his mother. So we're being taught lobbying in grade 1. Okay, you can lobby Jesus through his mother, hire Jesus' mother as your lobbyist with God. It's like, oh, okay. And so, and also the other thing about Catholicism that you're learning in grade 1, which you're not learning about the American government in grade 1, is this enormous governing structure, right? From the Pope, the papacy, I was going to say. The papacy is the equivalent of the presidency in that diagram, you know, and you have this College of Cardinals, which is the United States Senate. And so you have this whole model, this whole interactive model of a giant, long-lasting government, which is what it is. And, you know, you're working that diagram in your head down to monsignors, you know, who who are like members of the House. And, you know, the whole thing, there's this shape of the way that moves, you know, gets into your head. And that occurred to me when I was working in Washington, and I used to wonder, because I promise you, it was not because of their SAT scores. I used to wonder, you know, why are these, you know, Irish Catholic guys, tended to be Irish, but not necessarily Catholic guys, why are they the best ones around here about the politics of what this is? You know, not necessarily about the details of, you know, the throw weight of missiles or, you know, tax brackets and stuff, but the way it worked and how to get things done and how to anticipate human beings and all of that is somehow, there's something in the culture of what we grew up with, both in, you know, St. Anne's Parish, St. Brendan's. There's something in that culture that is advantageous to understanding the way this giant blob of the politics of governing works. But you know, the geography itself, I think it helps to, you know, come from as real a place in the world as you can, you know, to come from, to have a feel for the different altitudes of society, you know, and better, the lower you start, the better, you know, if you're going to end up in those positions. I think that helps.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next up is Jim. Jim, I think you're on.
I'm an OFD from Codman Square, Marks Parish. And I was wondering, as a producer and a writer for West Wing, you created a government that was both competent and effective. Do you have hope for the current government to be as effective as what you've portrayed?
You know, it's so interesting to me, Jim, because people have always been asking about that from the start of the show. You know, we started in the last days of the Clinton presidency, and people used to ask us, is this about the Clinton presidency? And it's go, absolutely not. And you know, we actually had a discussion in the writer's room. Aaron Sorkin, creator of the show, I was one of the first writers he hired for that to do episodes once NBC ordered episodes of the show. One of the early discussions we had, and it was kind of an ongoing discussion that we never resolved, other than to say we just never did it. We were thinking about, should our president have an intern, a Monica Lewinsky-like character, come across his path, someone who behaves kind of suggestively in some way in the West Wing of the White House, and our president, you know, when the door closes, says to someone, why don't you move her to the State Department? You know, like takes the action that Bill Clinton didn't take, you know, in order to, and only as a way of specifying this is not the Clinton presidency. And, you know, it's one of the many, I mean, every writer's room, whenever you see a show like that, we did 154 episodes. There are literally thousands of ideas like the one I just mentioned to you that go through the writer's room in discussion and get rejected and end up in a wastebasket that everybody forgets. But I just make that point just to say how conscious we were of wanting not to be interpreted to be the Clinton White House. And then we kind of, you know, in our terms, it was a relief in a certain kind of way when Bush became president, because everybody knew, well, you know, your fictional president's a Democrat, so it clearly isn't Bush. And then we were off the air by the time Obama came in, and people used to ask us how much we were anticipating Obama, and you know, we weren't really, to put it. And so I'm saying all of that just to say, for the first time, I am watching a presidency that, for me, does share a certain vibe with our fictional presidency. The Biden presidency does have the vibe of what we were doing, which is, the idea was a competent and experienced person with the right kind of competence and the right kind of experience is president. Now let's see what happens. And you know, so yeah, so this current presidency is, and here's a weird thing about it too, is that so many people in that field now, so many of the younger people working in this administration and even in the Obama administration were in high school watching the West Wing and making career decisions because of it. I mean, Barack Obama was a great speechwriter himself. I personally believe the best speechwriter, best presidential speechwriter of his own. But he had the best speechwriters, I believe, ever to work for president. And they all were in high school watching the West Wing and making career decisions about what they wanted to do by watching the West Wing. And when they told me that, I was just kind of, you know, stunned by it, because I mean, I was the one who had the least, you know, pretensions about what we were doing. I just thought, you know, we're doing an entertainment show. This is entertainment, you know. It could be set in the hospital, but it isn't. It's set in the White House. You know, I didn't think we were doing something important. And, you know, if we helped deliver those kids into what they did in the Obama administration campaigns and White House, then that's important enough for me.
Thank you.
All right, so next up is Richard, but we want to put people on notice. So after Richard's question, we're going to give folks in the audience a chance to ask a question. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, go ahead and raise your hand. And the way you do that is down at the bottom under the reactions button. You'll see if you click that, down at the bottom is a little thing that says raise hand, not to be confused with the thumbs up or the clapping, but the raise hand. So, all right, with that, you're on, Richard.
Okay, well, I'm glad to be here. I've watched your show a number of times and used to watch you on the Mclaughlin group. Missed you when you were gone from there, but have joined you on CNN a number of times. And I grew up in Lowell Mills. I'm a St. Gregory's guy. And my connection with the river was underneath the Central Avenue Bridge. And we didn't swim there, we drank there. Yeah. And at that point, the Baker's Chocolate Factory was, and the silos were empty. And that was another great place right along the Neponset to climb up into the silos up on the top, and be very careful that we didn't slip and go down into the silos, and to drink there as well. And I bear a wonderful branding from the Neponset River from having raced in what we call the lagoon, which is by the Iron Bridge right by Baker's Chocolate, and would freeze over pretty readily during the winter months. And my friends and I would skate there, but one day I went there probably in around 1970, it must have been actually 69, 68 or 69, and I wasn't on skates, I was on with shoes on, and decided they would have a running race to see who could slide the furthest along the ice. And of course, the clumsy person that I was, I hit a river weed reed sticking up through the ice and landed on my butt and slid across the uncool of broken 7-Up bottle that was embedded in the ice, and got about 26 stitches in my buttocks. So that's my connectus to the Neponset River, and I continue to do what I do with them. But I were growing up, and I had a brother-in-law that grew up on Milton Street. I don't know if you know the Collins family up on 176, Robert or Mary or Curtis or any of them, but they were right down in your neighborhood. So my question is, and I think I know the answer to this, and I don't know who had this question, but which river would you rather take a dip in? The Neponset River or national politics? And which one leaves you feeling clean and refreshed?
You know, for me now, swimming in the Neponset River, it's such an upgrade, you know. I mean, the water is so much cleaner now than it was in my day. I'd prefer that actually. And look, the last 4 years, the previous 4 years of the presidency was extremely difficult for to be professionally engaged in it, to kind of not be able to turn away from it, and all the turbulence of it, and the tension of it, and the madness of it. And I have relatives, I have people I love who are Trump voters, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's hard to understand, where we were and where we are now. The way I think about it is, if you don't love a Trump voter, and what I mean is, if your world doesn't include that, and it's entirely possible. It has a lot to do with accidents of geography of where you were born and all of that. But it's a much saner beat to be patrolling these days, to put it mildly. But Richard, one thing I wanted to mention in the adventures of those days is that we used to hop the freight trains down near, basically between Galvin Boulevard and the Keystone Factory, sometimes right beside the Keystone Factory. And so a lot of times they were stopped right beside the Keystone Factory, right? So you could sometimes, if you're lucky, hop one that was stopped, but usually they were moving, and they were moving relatively slowly, so that you could, put a hand up on the ladder that comes down the side of a freight car and run along with it, and then pull yourself up from that. And again, our house on Hilltop Street, the backyard of it was were those railroad tracks, right? And so, our parents knew we were doing that. They knew we were hopping the freight cars to ride down to Lower Mills, and then we'd kind of jump off somewhere around Lower Mills, and then if we're lucky, hop another one going back in the other direction. If not, just walk back.
Walk the tracks.
Yeah, walk the tracks. And but it's great to hear about life in Lower Mills, because that was like, it was just a destination. Like, we'd get up there and then basically just turn around and go back. Like, we never really, we never did anything, once we were up there. But the train tracks was another big part of our life adventures in those days.
That train track is now the Neponset Greenway Trail.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a question from the audience. Jude, do you have a question?
Yes, I first want to say, Lawrence, that my wife and I watch you every night, and we love your program. And I'm from Dorchester too, and I actually was on the board of the Neponset back in the when we did the first cleanup at right there at Central Avenue Bridge, where the train tracks go by, and love the Neponset and what we're doing. I'm probably in the same age category as you. You've probably got 10 years. You're probably 10 years younger than me. But anyway, my question is, what happened to your Boston accent? Now, I heard a little of it when you talked with Marty Walsh the other day, but how did you refine your accent?
Well, so here's what happened. Between the summer between high school and college, I got this crazy idea that I ended up doing of driving cross country, and I was doing it alone. And my mother let me take her car. I don't know how. It's inconceivable for that to happen now, And so I was driving cross country. That was the plan: drive cross country, and I'd come back, do this big circumnavigation, drive out to, Oregon, and then down to, Southern California, and then back through the Southern Road. I did all that. However, at the end of the first day of driving, I was in New Jersey, I guess Western New Jersey, which was the farthest west I've ever been in my life, was Western New Jersey. And I had to get gas for this car. And I had to talk to a gas station attendant. And he didn't understand a word I was saying about this car. I didn't really understand what he was saying, but somehow we got gas in the car, filled it up. And I went, oh, Jesus, I've got to learn to speak American. If I'm going to be out here, it's just going to get worse from here. This is New Jersey, for Christ's sake. And so I'm driving across Pennsylvania, and I find CBS News Radio. And I am sitting there in the car listening to news radio as if I was in the language lab, you know, in high school with the earphones on, listening to French. And I'm listening to American be spoken, and I'm trying to learn that. And so I eventually did. I mean, it probably took, you know, I mean, it took well into my 30s. It took, you know, I'd say probably 15 years to internalize it. But it's my second language. And whenever I'm speaking American, it takes concentration. I'm thinking about it. I am consciously speaking American. But, you know, when I go up to my brother's boat, as I will this summer, and it's the, you know, the four of us are sitting on that boat, you won't hear a word of American from me. I remember when it was a point somewhere where I was at my mother's house, and I had my nieces and nephews were there. It was long before I had a child. And, you know, they were all in the elementary school age. And I got some kind of business phone call while I was there. Somebody from California was calling. And I got on the phone in my mother's living room. And I'm talking to this guy in LA about some show business project. And I hear the little kids in the other room saying, "Uncle Lawrence sounds so weird," because I shifted into American on the phone, and they'd never heard that before.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lawrence. This has been wonderful. I think you definitely passed the test of, you know, our Dorchester panel. It confirmed you're really from Dorchester. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and talk with us tonight. You've been very generous with your time. And as a little thank you, and again, I can't hand it to you, but as a little thank you, we are going to make a nice donation to a charity that you organized called Kids in Need of Desks. And I think hopefully one of the staff can put the address of that charity. It's a very worthy group. Do you want to say a word about it, Lawrence?
I would love to. There's a Boston piece of this that's very important. This happened because of Boston. In the summer before I started doing this show on MSNBC, which was 10 years ago, I was in Boston. My daughter was beginning to look at colleges, and a dear friend of mine, Meg Campbell, who runs Codman Academy Charter School in Codman Square in Dorchester. She was actually giving us her input on colleges, and we went out to see some colleges in Western Massachusetts one day, and we're driving back in Meg's car. And she had just returned from Malawi, where her niece was working as a doctor. But because she's an educator, she went around to schools and she said to them, "What do you need?" And every single teacher said exactly the same thing: "We need chairs." And it kind of threw her, because she thought it might be books, it was chairs. And it's because in those schools, there are no desks, no chairs, nothing. All the kids just sit on the floor. And those floors are either a cement floor or a dirt floor in those classrooms. And they're crowded in there. And she's telling me this story. And I found myself saying, well, we can get them chairs, can't we? And I don't know why I was moved to do that. And I had 1 week that summer where my daughter was going to be away at camp, and I could do whatever I wanted to do that week. And I decided I'm going to go to Malawi. I'm going to check out the school situation and figure out how to get, you know, desks and chairs in schools there. And I ended up doing that. And the reason there's another Boston piece of this that I have to hook up to it that made me think that way. And it was, I think I started doing the show in October of that year, maybe late September, but I made the deal to do the show in June. And so I had months where I was thinking about, you know, what is this show going to be? How do I do it? And a dear friend of mine, was in LA talking to me, asking me about it. And this person has a very strong Boston connection. This is Karen Russell, whose father is a guy named Bill Russell, who used to work for a place called the Boston Celtics. And so this is Bill Russell's daughter, who's a Harvard Law School graduate, who was working in LA at the time as a show business lawyer and all that. And what she said to me about this, which is kind of taken from her father's way of looking at the world, Bill Russell's way of looking at the world. What she said to me about the show is, I remember the way she said it. She said, "What are you going to do with the show?" Those are exact words. "What are you going to do with the show?" And I said, "Well, it's kind of all the same show. I mean, I'm just going to have guests and, you're going to talk about, it's like what they do in the other hours. It's just," and she, "No, I don't mean that. I don't mean that. I mean, you have this show now. You have a forum. You have different opportunities that come to you because you have this show. What are you going to do with the show?" And I didn't have an answer, but I knew she was saying something very, very, very important to me that I was not going to think of on my own. And so when Meg said that thing about, they don't have any desks in those schools, and I said, "Well, what can we do about that?" I don't know that I would have thought that if Karen Russell hadn't said to me, "What are you going to do with that show?" And so we did it, and it's kind of an amazing thing. The only way any money is raised for this is on my show. We don't have, ballroom galas and have celebrities come to an event and sell tickets to anything. I just talk about it, once a year in the Christmas season on my show. And people respond to the need the way I did, which is, it's a very clear and simple need. And people just, have poured out their support for it. And that couldn't have been done without the show. And I wouldn't have done it without that incredibly valuable Boston input from those two, great Boston thinkers, Meg Campbell and Karen Russell, both of whom were smarter than I was about what my opportunities were with that show. And so anyone at any time of year can always go to the website, lastworddesks.msnbc.com. And it's something that is so needed. We also have a component of the fund now, which provides scholarships for girls to attend high school in Malawi, because, and this is true in virtually every African country, public school is free only for elementary school. It is not free for high school. And the tuition can be what we think of as tiny, anything from, $16 or $30 or so a year to $350 a year, but not more than that. And but that's just unimaginable amounts of money for families, especially if they have more than one kid. And so, and if they have, the kid they're more likely to send to high school will be the boy than the girl, or one of the girls. And so the girls, their graduation rate is half the graduation rate of boys. And so we need to pump that help into that system. And, whenever everybody in every job has their days when, there's something that's, as we would say down the river, there's something that's really pissing them off about this. And, why am I doing it? I'm gonna, goddamn, I'm not gonna, and so my first executive producer on the show had a method that has been employed by each of her successors in that position. And that is, every time I say something like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this job, she used to say to me what she has instructed her successors to say to me, and it always works. And they just say, we need more desks. And I go, oh yeah, okay. And so it is, by far, for me, the most important thing about doing that show is that it enables me, as Karen Russell would put it, to do something with that show.
Excellent. And it's a great group. And as I mentioned, we put the link to it in the chat. If you're not familiar, if you go down towards the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat button and you can find the link to it. It's a great cause, and we will do a little bit of our part, but hopefully others will do their part. And clearly, if you appreciate the show, you better keep giving, because otherwise Lawrence might quit. So, and just to add a little extra color to our thank you, we're also going to mail you a 6-pack of Neponset Gold from Dorchester Brewery, which is, as far as we know, the first craft beer ever named after the Neponset, along with a paddle guide to the Neponset and a certificate you can redeem anytime for a free guided paddle of the Neponset, with or without a swimming or bridge jumping component, as you prefer.
I'm going to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being with us. And to wrap us up, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, our new board president, who's going to do the most important task of the evening, which is presiding over the raffle and the final motion. Is Kyle, we highlight Kyle? There we go.
Yeah. Lawrence, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. I feel like we're just getting like that iceberg. We're getting the 10% and the 90% more that you're probably withholding just because of time and circumstance. But thank you so much for joining us. We really loved it. All right, so now on to the fun annual event of the kayak raffle. So thank you all for purchasing tickets. Nancy, at this point, you want to share your screen? All right, so this is the Neponset 3000. As if the staff didn't do enough, they created this incredible program to pick at random the kayak winner. The 3000 is new and improved. The Neponset 2000 didn't survive Y2K, so we had to update it. But here we are. Click the button. So I'm getting flashbacks of Wheel of Fortune here, but we'll land on a name soon. Debbie Sharp. Debbie, congratulations. I'm not sure if you're still on the call. We will reach out to you just to set up the logistics as it relates to delivery, pickup, and everything else. But congratulations, Debbie, and thanks again for all of your support. So I will. I'm going to wrap this up. Give me a quick second here. So we did a very deep dive a couple of years ago. We did a strategic plan where we just did a very thorough analysis of what the organization is doing, what our goals are, to try to really put us on a path to succeed, which I certainly think that we're on that path. But one thing that I noticed right away is that when we did an analysis of what the staff is doing, if you didn't know any better, you would have assumed that this was a 30-person organization. I mean, this staff really punches above their weight class and does so much, for being a group of 8-9 individuals. So our job is just to make sure we provide them all the resources and all the tools that they need, because they play such a vital and pivotal part in our communities, so to allow them to succeed and really beautify the river and everything that's surrounded and attached to it. So a big thank you to our corporate sponsors, especially E&E Systems, Cedar Grove. Thank you, Richard. Porter Sales and Service, Bank of Canton. But also thank you all your individuals. It's not just the monetary component, it's the time, it's the energy, it's the commitment, and really building this community around the river that I think, as Lauren can attest, plays a really important part of a lot of our lives. So thank you for that. So on that note, you can stick around, but I think we've had a great night. I think this has worked out really well. I think we're all getting the hang of these virtual meetings, although I'm still 50-50 on the mute button. And funny enough, I lost internet about a minute before I had to jump on this closure. So thankfully I got it back. But stick around. Love to see all of you soon. But on this note, I'm going to call a motion to adjourn. Can I get a motion?
So, second.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. And again, Mr. O'Donnell, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed it. A lot of fun tonight. And again, I hope to see you all in person next year, but this ain't so bad. So thank you.